The day I walked out of that courtroom a free man would be the day my daughter lost everything she'd stolen from me. I took a deep breath of the cold Vancouver air, watching the rain streak down the window of my lawyer's office. 22 months. That's how long they'd kept me locked away for a crime I didn't commit. 22 months of concrete walls, fluorescent lights, and the bitter taste of betrayal that never quite left my mouth. My name is Richard Holloway, and I'm 63 years old. For 40 years, I built Holloway Marine Supply from nothing into one of the most respected maritime equipment suppliers in British Columbia. My late wife, Catherine, and I had poured everything into that business. When she passed 5 years ago from cancer, I threw myself even deeper into the work. It was all I had left aside from our daughter, Rebecca. Even now, saying her name feels like swallowing glass. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a Tuesday morning in March 2022. I remember because the cherry blossoms were just starting to bloom along my street in Kitsilano. I'd arrived at the office early, as always, to review our quarterly reports. We'd just secured a major contract with the Canadian Coast Guard. $6 million, the culmination of 2 years of negotiations. Rebecca had been my CFO for the past 8 years. She was brilliant with numbers, had an MBA from UBC, and I'd been so proud when she joined the family business. Her husband, John Cole, worked as a consultant for various tech startups. Nice enough guy, or so I thought. They'd been married for 4 years and had a daughter, my granddaughter Emma, who was 6 years old at the time. That morning, Rebecca walked into my office with John and 2 RCMP officers. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice flat and cold in a way I'd never heard before. The officers informed me I was under investigation for embezzling $850,000 from Holloway Marine Supply. I stared at Rebecca. "This is a mistake. Rebecca, tell them this is a mistake." She wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she slid a folder across my desk. "We found the transfers, Dad, all of them going to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. An account in your name." My hands shook as I opened the folder. Page after page of transaction records, wire transfers, bank statements, all bearing my electronic signature, all authorized from my login credentials. "I didn't do this," I said. My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "Rebecca, you know me. You know I would never—" "The evidence is clear," John interrupted, speaking for the first time. His voice was smooth, sympathetic almost. "We've been conducting an internal audit for the past 3 months. The pattern is undeniable." 3 months. They'd been investigating me for 3 months and never said a word. "I need to speak with my daughter. Alone." I looked directly at Rebecca, pleading with my eyes. She finally met my gaze, and what I saw there froze my blood. Nothing. No warmth, no hesitation, no doubt, just a cold calculation. "There's nothing to discuss privately, Dad. The board has already been notified. We had no choice but to contact the authorities." The board. Of course. Holloway Marine Supply had expanded significantly over the past decade. We'd brought in outside investors, created a proper board of directors. I still owned 51% of the company, but Rebecca held 20%, and the remaining shares were split among 3 other board members. One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Holloway, we're not arresting you at this time, but we'll need you to come down to the station for questioning. We also need to secure your office and personal devices." I looked around my office, the mahogany desk Catherine and I had picked out together when we first moved into this building. The photographs on the wall chronicling 40 years of company milestones. The model ship my father had given me when I started the business. The same ship that inspired our logo. Everything I'd built. Everything I was, being stripped away because of numbers on a screen. "I want to call my lawyer," I said quietly. John spoke again. "Of course, that's your right. But Richard, I want you to know this wasn't personal, it's just business. The company has to protect itself. It's just business. The words that would echo in my head for the next 22 months. They escorted me out through the warehouse, past employees who'd worked for me for decades, past the loading docks where I'd once operated the forklift myself during busy seasons, past the conference room where Catherine and I had celebrated our first $1 million year. Rebecca walked slightly ahead, her shoulders rigid, never once looking back. In the parking lot, as the officers were about to put me in their vehicle, I called out to her, "Rebecca, please look at me." She stopped, slowly turned. "I didn't do this," I said. "I don't know how this happened, but I didn't do this. You're my daughter. You have to believe me." For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Doubt? Guilt? I couldn't tell. Then John appeared beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, honey, let's go back inside. There's a lot to handle." She nodded and turned away. That was the last conversation I had with my daughter as a free man. My lawyer, Douglas Chen, had handled our corporate legal matters for 15 years. When I called him from the police station, I could hear the shock in his voice. "Richard, I've reviewed our company accounts quarterly for the past decade. If there was systematic embezzlement on this scale, I would have noticed." "Then how did this happen?" I asked. We were sitting in a small interview room at the RCMP's Financial Crimes Division. "How are their transaction records with my signature from my login to an account I've never seen before?" Douglas leaned forward, his expression grave. "Someone with very sophisticated knowledge of your systems. Someone who had access to your credentials, your authorization protocols, your signature stamps. Richard, who at the company has that level of access?" The answer was obvious. "Rebecca. As CFO, she has admin access to everything. We need to consider the possibility that your daughter is involved in framing you." I shook my head violently. "No, not Rebecca. She's my daughter, Catherine's daughter. She wouldn't—" "Richard." Douglas's voice was gentle but firm. "In my 30 years practicing law, I've seen family members do unspeakable things for money. You need to prepare yourself for that possibility." Over the next 3 weeks, while I was released on bail, Douglas and I worked to build my defense. We hired a forensic accountant named Patricia Leung. She'd worked for the RCMP's white-collar crime division before going private. Patricia spent 60 hours reviewing every transaction, every login record, every digital fingerprint. What she found was sophisticated. Frighteningly so. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing," she explained, showing us her analysis on her laptop. The transfers started small, $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Amounts that could easily be explained as legitimate business expenses. They escalated gradually over 18 months. "Can you trace who actually made the transfers?" I asked. "That's the problem. The login credentials are yours. The IP addresses match your office computer and your home computer. The timing corresponds to when you would normally be working. Whoever did this either had complete access to your devices or what? Or they cloned your devices, created mirror systems that could generate authentic-looking activity logs." Douglas wrote notes rapidly. "That's our defense. Someone with technical expertise and internal access created a sophisticated frame job. But proving it would be nearly impossible. The Crown prosecutor, a sharp woman named Olivia Tran, had a mountain of documentation. Bank records, transfer authorizations, email trails discussing investment strategies in the Cayman Islands, all bearing my name. During one particularly brutal meeting with Prosecutor Tran, she laid out her case with clinical precision. "Mr. Holloway, your wife died 5 years ago, leaving you the majority shareholder of a successful company. Your daughter joined as CFO. Shortly after, systematic transfers begin to an offshore account. The pattern suggests someone planning for retirement. moving money beyond the reach of Canadian tax authorities. "I have retirement accounts," I protested. "Legitimate RRSPs, pension plans. Why would I risk everything for $850,000, she interrupted. "That's not an insignificant amount, especially for someone looking to maintain a certain lifestyle. I live in the same house I've owned for 35 years. I drive a 10-year-old truck. What lifestyle?" She smiled thinly. "The investigation is ongoing. We'll see what else emerges." That night I sat in my house, the same house where Catherine and I had raised Rebecca, where we'd celebrated Christmas mornings and birthday parties, where my granddaughter Emma had learned to walk. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Rebecca's number. I'd called her 23 times since that morning in my office. She'd never answered, never returned a message. I tried again. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Rebecca, it's Dad." Again. "Please, honey, I need to talk to you. I need to understand what's happening. I need you to look at me and tell me you really believe I did this. That's all I'm asking. Just talk to me, please." I ended the call and sat in the silence of my empty house. My phone buzzed. A text message. Finally, but it wasn't from Rebecca. It was from John. "Richard, Rebecca has asked me to communicate on her behalf. She finds this situation too painful to discuss directly. The evidence is overwhelming. Please stop contacting her. It's better for everyone if you focus on your legal defense. We'll handle the company." John. "We'll handle the company." Something cold settled in my stomach. I looked at the message again, reading between the lines. Rebecca was CFO. With me removed, she'd have unchallenged control of the financial operations. But she still only owned 20%. The board could overrule her. Unless I opened my laptop and logged into the company shareholder portal. My access hadn't been revoked yet. I pulled up the current ownership structure, and there it was. 3 weeks earlier, on the same day the RCMP had shown up at my office, 2 of the 3 outside board members had sold their shares, 15% each, 30% total, sold to Rebecca Cole, which meant she now controlled 50% of the company. Combined with John's influence and the remaining board member, a retired naval officer named Gerald Thompson, who'd always been easier to manipulate, they effectively controlled Holloway Marine Supply. All they needed was me out of the way. I called Douglas immediately. "I need you to look into something," I said, my voice shaking with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Not anger yet, something deeper. The board members who sold their shares to Rebecca. Find out when those deals were negotiated. Find out what they were paid. You think this goes deeper than embezzlement? I think my daughter and her husband are trying to steal my company. The trial began in September 2022, 6 months after my arrest. By then I'd lost 30 pounds, stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night, stopped calling Rebecca. Douglas had uncovered some troubling information. The 2 board members who sold their shares to Rebecca, William Fraser and Angela Chow, had both been approached by John Cole months before the embezzlement investigation became public. John had offered them prices well above market value for their stakes in the company. "Where did Rebecca get the money?" I'd asked Douglas. "That's the interesting part. She took out a substantial loan from a private equity firm, one that John has connections to through his consulting work. So John arranged the financing for Rebecca to buy control of my company, right before I was accused of embezzlement. It certainly appears that way. Can we use this at trial?" Douglas's expression was grim. "It's circumstantial. It shows suspicious timing, but it doesn't prove they fabricated the evidence against you. The Crown's case is built on hard financial records. We need to discredit those records, and Patricia still hasn't found definitive proof of manipulation." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutor Tran presented her case with devastating efficiency. Transaction record after transaction record, expert witnesses confirming the authenticity of the digital signatures, bank officials from the Cayman Islands confirming the account existed in my name. Rebecca testified for the Crown. She sat in the witness box wearing a dark blue suit, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked thin, exhausted, but composed. "Ms. Cole," Prosecutor Tran began, "can you describe your role at Holloway Marine Supply?" "I'm the Chief Financial Officer. I've held that position for 8 years." "And your relationship to the defendant?" "He's my father." Her voice was steady, emotionless. "When did you first become aware of the irregular transactions?" Rebecca recounted discovering anomalies during a routine audit, how she'd initially assumed they were clerical errors, how the pattern had become undeniable, how she'd agonized over what to do before finally bringing her concerns to the board. "This must have been incredibly difficult," Prosecutor Tran said with practiced sympathy. "Having to report your own father." "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. "But the company has obligations. To our employees, to our clients, to our shareholders. I had to put that above personal feelings." When Douglas cross-examined her, he was respectful but pointed. "Ms. Cole, you testified that you discovered these irregularities during a routine audit. But you didn't report them immediately. Did you?" "No. I needed to be certain." "You needed to be certain your father was embezzling from the company he built, the company your mother helped create. How long did this certainty take?" "Approximately 3 months. 3 months during which you continued working alongside your father, having dinner with him, bringing your daughter to visit him, all while believing he was stealing from the company?" Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. "I was trying to find another explanation. I didn't want to believe it." "During those 3 months, did you discuss your concerns with your father?" "No." "Did you give him an opportunity to explain?" The evidence spoke for itself. "I see. Ms. Cole, isn't it true that during these same 3 months, your husband, John Cole, was negotiating to purchase shares from board members Fraser and Chow? That was a separate matter. A separate matter that gave you effective control of the company once your father was removed?" Prosecutor Tran objected. The judge sustained it. Douglas tried a different angle. "Ms. Cole, you have administrator access to all of the company's financial systems, correct?" "Yes." "Including access to your father's login credentials?" "Only in emergency situations, and all access is logged." "But technically possible." "Yes, but I never—" "Thank you, Ms. Cole." It wasn't enough. Douglas and I both knew it. The physical evidence was too strong, and Patricia still couldn't definitively prove the records had been falsified. John testified as well, positioning himself as the concerned son-in-law who'd supported Rebecca through this terrible ordeal. He was smooth, sympathetic, and perfect. When I took the stand in my own defense, I told the truth, simply and directly. I did not embezzle money from Holloway Marine Supply. I did not create an offshore account. I did not authorize these transfers. I have devoted 40 years of my life to building this company with integrity. I would never compromise that. I would never compromise my family's legacy. But truth without proof is just words. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the forewoman stood and delivered the verdict with a voice that barely carried across the courtroom. "On the count of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty." The sentencing hearing was brief. Despite my age and lack of criminal history, the judge was harsh. "Mr. Holloway, you held a position of trust. You built a reputation over decades, which makes your betrayal of that trust even more egregious. The court sentences you to 4 years in federal prison." Douglas immediately filed for appeal, but I was remanded into custody that afternoon. As the guards led me away, I looked back at the courtroom gallery. Rebecca was there, sitting next to John. Our eyes met for just a moment. I mouthed two words. I'm sorry. Not sorry for what I'd done. I hadn't done anything. Sorry for whatever had broken between us. Sorry for not seeing this coming. Sorry for failing her in some way I still didn't understand. She looked away. Fraser Valley Institution for Men. Minimum security, but still prison. Concrete walls, locked doors, the constant noise of men living too close together with nowhere to go. I was processed, issued a uniform, assigned to a cell. My cellmate was a 45-year-old man named Raymond who'd been convicted of tax fraud. He was quiet, kept to himself, which I appreciated. The first week was the hardest, learning the routines, learning where you could sit in the cafeteria and where you couldn't, learning which guards were reasonable and which enjoyed their power a little too much. I called Rebecca 3 times during that first week. She never accepted the charges. I wrote letters, long letters explaining everything, telling her I loved her, begging her to bring Emma to visit, to at least let me see my granddaughter. The letters were never answered. Douglas visited twice a month. The appeal process was slow. He'd found a few small procedural irregularities from the trial, but nothing substantial enough to overturn the verdict. I'm still investigating the financial side, he told me during one visit. Patricia has a contact at the RCMP's cybercrime division, someone who might be willing to take another look at the technical evidence. How long will that take? Months, maybe longer. Months became a year. The appeal was denied. Douglas filed for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of British Columbia, but the chances were slim. I adapted to prison life the way you adapt to anything you can't change. I worked in the prison library, read extensively, taught a financial literacy class for inmates preparing for release. At night, lying on my narrow bunk, I thought about Catherine. Wondered what she would say if she could see what had become of our family, our daughter, our company, everything we'd built together. I thought about Emma, who would be 8 now, whether she even remembered her grandfather, what Rebecca had told her about why I wasn't around anymore. I thought about John Cole, and the sick feeling in my stomach grew stronger each month. Douglas kept working, Patricia kept investigating, and I kept waiting. Then 18 months into my sentence, Douglas arrived for a visit with an expression I'd never seen before, something between excitement and fury. "We found it," he said, sitting across from me in the visiting room. Patricia's contact at the cybercrime division. He did us a favor, completely off the books. He found evidence of a sophisticated remote access Trojan on your home and office computers. Someone installed malware that gave them complete control of your devices. My heart started pounding. Can we prove it was Rebecca? Or John? Not directly. But the Trojan was installed from an IP address that traces back to a coffee shop in Yaletown, 1 block from John's office. And the installation date matches a time when John visited your office to drop off some documents Rebecca had forgotten. That's not enough for a conviction. No, but it's enough to reopen the case. Combined with the suspicious timing of the share purchases, the private equity loan arrangements, and now this, we can petition for a new trial based on newly discovered evidence. Hope. For the first time in 18 months, I felt actual hope. How long? The petition has to be filed, reviewed, and scheduled for hearing. 4 to 6 months. 4 to 6 months. I'd already served 18. What was another half year? But Douglas wasn't finished. There's something else. Something Patricia discovered while investigating the private equity firm that loaned Rebecca the money to buy the shares. He slid a document across the table. It was a corporate registry filing. The private equity firm is called Cole Ventures Capital. It was incorporated 2 years ago. The principal shareholder and CEO is John Cole's father, Martin Cole. I stared at the document, the implications hitting me like physical blows. John's father loaned Rebecca the money to buy control of my company. More than that, look at the board of directors. I scanned the list, and there, listed as a board member of Cole Ventures Capital, was a name I recognized. Gerald Thompson, the remaining board member from Holloway Marine Supply. The retired naval officer I'd always thought was weak, but harmless. They're all connected, I said slowly. John, his father, Gerald Thompson. This wasn't just about framing me for embezzlement. This was a coordinated plan to steal my company. That's exactly what Patricia thinks, and there's more. Cole Ventures Capital has been aggressively recruiting clients from Holloway Marine Supply's customer base, offering better rates, faster delivery, premium service packages. They're cannibalizing my business. What's left of it? According to public filings, Holloway Marine Supply's revenue has dropped 40% since your incarceration. They've had to lay off half the staff. The Coast Guard contract fell through after questions about the company's ethical leadership. The company Catherine and I had spent 40 years building was being destroyed. And Rebecca was overseeing it all. Unless... Douglas, what if Rebecca doesn't know? He looked at me skeptically. Richard, she testified against you. She's running the company while it's being systematically dismantled. What if John manipulated her? What if he convinced her I was actually guilty? Fed her false evidence, controlled what she saw, isolated her from anyone who might raise questions? That's a generous interpretation. She's my daughter. I need to believe there's something left of the girl I raised. Douglas sighed. Even if that's true, she's legally complicit now. She testified under oath. She took control of the company. Whether she was manipulated or not, she made choices. Then we need to show her the truth. When the petition for a new trial is filed, she'll see the evidence of the malware. The connections between John and his father and Thompson, she'll have to see it. And if she doesn't want to see it, I didn't have an answer for that. The petition for a new trial was filed in March 2024, exactly 2 years after my arrest. The hearing was scheduled for late May. During those 2 months, Douglas prepared meticulously. Patricia compiled a comprehensive report detailing the malware infection, the network of corporate connections, and the suspicious financial transactions that had facilitated the theft of Holloway Marine Supply. I waited in prison, counting down the days. Then 3 weeks before the hearing, I received an unexpected visitor. Gerald Thompson. I almost refused to see him. This man had betrayed me as surely as Rebecca had. But curiosity won out. He sat across from me in the visiting room, looking older than I remembered, thinner. His hands shook slightly as he placed them on the table. "Richard," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to see you before the hearing. Why? Because I need to tell someone the truth, and you deserve to hear it." He took a shaky breath. "John Cole approached me 2 years ago. Said he was concerned about the company's direction. Said you were making risky decisions, that the business needed younger leadership. He offered me a consulting position with Cole Ventures Capital. Good money. Better than my board stipend. So you sold me out for a paycheck. I thought I was helping the company transition. That's what John told me, that it would be smooth, professional. That you'd step aside voluntarily once you saw the writing on the wall. And when I didn't?" Gerald's eyes filled with tears. "He told me about the embezzlement evidence, showed me the transaction records, said it had been going on for over a year. I believed him. You have to understand, Richard, the evidence was compelling. Did you ever ask me about it? Ever give me a chance to defend myself?" "No." He looked down at his hands. And I've regretted that every day since. Why are you here, Gerald? Because it's all falling apart. Cole Ventures was supposed to be building a maritime supply empire. Instead, John's father has been using it as a shell company to hide debt. They borrowed heavily to fund the acquisition of Holloway shares and start the client poaching operation. Now they're defaulting on loans. The whole structure is collapsing. And you're going down with it. I've lost everything. My reputation, my savings, my wife of 40 years just filed for divorce. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because Rebecca doesn't know. I leaned forward. Doesn't know what? Any of it. John has been controlling all her information. Everything she sees goes through him first. He's convinced her you're guilty, that the appeal is just legal maneuvering, that she needs to trust him to save the company. How do you know this? I overheard an argument 2 weeks ago. Rebecca wanted to come visit you. Said she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. John talked her out of it, told her it was guilt manipulation, that you were using her emotions against her. Something broke open in my chest. She'd wanted to visit. After 2 years, she'd wanted to see me. Gerald, you need to testify at the hearing. Tell them everything you just told me. I will. That's why I'm here. I've already spoken to your lawyer. I'm prepared to give a full statement about John's involvement, the corporate structure, everything. This will destroy you completely. I'm already destroyed, Richard. At least this way, I can do one honest thing. After Gerald left, I sat in the visiting room long after I was supposed to return to my cell. A guard finally came to collect me and didn't say anything about the tears on my face. That night, I wrote another letter to Rebecca, the last one I would send. Dear Rebecca, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you've read any of the letters I've sent over the past 2 years. But I need to write it anyway. In 3 weeks, there will be a hearing about my case. New evidence has emerged that I hope will prove my innocence. But more than that, evidence has emerged about John, about his father, about a plan that was set in motion long before you and I walked into my office with those RCMP officers. I'm not asking you to believe me. Not yet. I'm asking you to come to the hearing, to listen, to look at the evidence with your own eyes, not filtered through anyone else. You're a brilliant woman, Rebecca. You have your mother's intelligence and her integrity. I raised you to ask questions, to verify information, to trust your instincts. Trust them now. Whatever happens, whatever you discover, I want you to know that I have never stopped loving you. You are my daughter. Nothing can change that. And Emma, please tell her grandfather loves her. Tell her I think about her every day. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't there for her 8th birthday, for 2nd grade, for all the little moments I've missed. I'll be in that courtroom in 3 weeks. I hope you'll be there too. Love, Dad. I sent the letter through Douglas to ensure it wouldn't be intercepted. Whether Rebecca would read it, whether she would come, I had no idea. All I could do was wait. The hearing room was smaller than the original trial courtroom, less formal. But it felt more significant somehow. Douglas was there along with Patricia and her technical expert from the cybercrime division. Prosecutor Tran was there, looking less confident than she had 2 years ago. The judge was a woman in her early 60s named Justice Miranda Walsh, known for her meticulous attention to detail. And in the gallery, sitting alone in the 3rd row, was Rebecca. She wore a simple gray dress, no jewelry. Her hair was down and she looked exhausted. But she was there. John was not. The hearing began with Douglas presenting the new evidence. The malware analysis. The network of corporate connections. Gerald Thompson's sworn affidavit detailing the coordination between John Cole, his father, and the plan to seize control of Holloway Marine Supply. Patricia's cybercrime expert walked through the technical details with clarity that even I could follow. The malware in question is a sophisticated remote access tool known as a RAT. It was installed on both of Mr. Holloway's computers approximately 20 months before the first suspicious transaction occurred. This gave the attacker complete control of the devices, including the ability to execute commands, access files, and generate activity that would appear to originate from Mr. Holloway himself. "Can you determine who installed this malware?" Justice Walsh asked. "The installation was executed from an IP address that we've traced to a coffee shop in Yaletown. Security footage from that day which we've obtained shows John Cole entering the establishment and using a laptop for approximately 45 minutes during the time window when the malware was deployed. Is it possible Mr. Cole was simply working on his own computer? Possible, but unlikely. The malware deployment required advanced technical knowledge. Mr. Cole's background includes a degree in computer science and previous work in cybersecurity consulting before he transitioned to business consulting." Douglas then presented the financial evidence. The loan from Cole Ventures Capital, the board connections, the systematic client poaching operation. "This wasn't a crime of opportunity," Douglas argued. "This was a coordinated multi-year plan to frame an innocent man and steal his life's work." When Gerald Thompson was called to testify, you could feel the tension in the room shift. He looked directly at Rebecca as he took the oath. His testimony was devastating. He detailed every conversation with John, every lie he'd been told, every step of the manipulation. "I thought I was helping the company," Gerald said, his voice breaking. "Instead, I helped destroy a good man and betray a friend of 20 years. Prosecutor Tran cross-examined, but her heart wasn't in it. The evidence was overwhelming. Finally, Douglas called me to the stand. I testified for 90 minutes. Walked through my entire relationship with the company, with Rebecca, with John. Explained my complete lack of technical knowledge that would have been required to create offshore accounts and execute sophisticated financial transfers. "Mr. Holloway," Justice Walsh asked, "why do you believe your daughter testified against you at the original trial?" I looked at Rebecca. She was staring at her hands. "Because she was manipulated by someone she loved and trusted. Someone who took advantage of her grief over losing her mother, her dedication to the company, and her desire to do the right thing. My daughter is not a criminal. She's a victim just like I am." The hearing concluded with closing arguments. Douglas was passionate but restrained, focusing on the evidence rather than emotion. Prosecutor Tran made a surprising statement. "Your Honor, in light of the new evidence presented, the Crown acknowledges that there are serious questions about the safety of the original conviction. We do not oppose the petition for a new trial." Justice Walsh took a brief recess, then returned with her decision. "The evidence presented today is compelling and raises substantial doubts about the reliability of the original trial's outcome. Mr. Holloway, your petition for a new trial is granted. Furthermore, given the nature of the new evidence, I am ordering your immediate release pending the new trial proceedings." The words took a moment to register. Immediate release. I was going home. Douglas gripped my shoulder. Patricia was smiling. The guard stepped forward to process my release. But I was looking at Rebecca. She stood slowly, her face pale, her hands shaking. Our eyes met across the courtroom. And then she ran, not away, toward. She pushed through the courtroom railing, past the Crown prosecutor, past the guards. "Dad," she sobbed, throwing her arms around me. "Oh God, Dad, what did I do? What did I do?" I held her while she cried. Held her like I used to when she was a little girl and had nightmares. Held her like I thought I'd never get to again. "It's okay," I whispered. "We're going to fix this. We're going to fix everything." The processing for my release took 3 hours. At that time, Rebecca sat with me and Douglas, and we began piecing together the full extent of what had happened. "I wanted to visit you so many times," Rebecca said, her voice still thick with tears. "But John said it would compromise the company, that the investors were watching, that any appearance of supporting you would damage our credibility." "Tell me about the company," I said gently. "What's really been happening?" She pulled out her phone and showed me financial statements that made my stomach turn. Holloway Marine Supply was hemorrhaging money. The Coast Guard contract had been terminated. Major clients had left. Employee count was down from 150 to 65. John said it was market conditions, that we'd recover once we restructured. He kept having me sign off on decisions, operational changes, vendor agreements. I trusted him. I trusted everything he told me. "The vendor agreements," Douglas interrupted. "Do you still have copies?" Rebecca nodded, pulling up files on her phone. Douglas scanned them, his expression darkening. "These aren't standard vendor agreements. Look at the payment terms, net 120 days, with penalties for early payment. And the vendors themselves," he Googled several names. "These are shell companies, all registered to Martin Cole." "What does that mean?" Rebecca asked. "It means money flowing out of Holloway Marine Supply was going directly to John's father. You weren't paying legitimate vendors. You were funneling company funds to Cole Ventures Capital to keep their operation afloat." Rebecca's face went white. "I signed those. My authorization, my signature. John said they were necessary to maintain supply chains during the transition." "You were being used to legally strip assets from your own company," Douglas said. "The question is, how much?" Over the next hour, Rebecca pulled up every agreement, every transaction, every decision she'd made over the past 2 years. The picture that emerged was staggering. Nearly $3 million had been transferred out of Holloway Marine Supply to various coal-controlled entities. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. "I did this," Rebecca whispered. "Even if I didn't know, I did this." "John did this," I corrected. "Using you." "Where is he now?" Douglas asked. "He said he had meetings all day. He didn't want me to come to the hearing. Said it would be too painful, that I should let him handle monitoring the proceedings." She laughed bitterly. "He knew, didn't he? He knew what was coming." Douglas was already on his phone calling someone. "We need to move fast. If John realizes the hearing went badly, he'll run. We need to freeze assets, file criminal charges, get authorities involved before—" Rebecca's phone rang. John's name appeared on the screen. She looked at me. "What do I do?" "Answer it," Douglas said. "Act normal. We need to know where he is." She put the phone on speaker with shaking hands. "Hey, babe," John's voice was smooth, unsuspecting. "How are you holding up? I know today was hard." "It was difficult," Rebecca said, her voice remarkably steady. "The hearing just finished." "How did it go?" "The judge granted the petition. They're releasing Dad immediately and setting a new trial date." Silence. Then carefully controlled. "That's unexpected. The evidence seemed so clear." "They found new evidence about malware on Dad's computers, about connections between you and—" She paused, then decided to push. "About connections between you and Gerald Thompson and your father." Another pause. Longer this time. "Rebecca, whatever they told you, it's a lie. Desperation tactics. Your father's lawyers are—" "Where are you, John?" "At the office. Why?" "Which office?" "My office downtown." "Rebecca, what's going on?" She looked at Douglas, who was already texting someone. He nodded. "I need you to come home. We need to talk. I'll be there in an hour, but Rebecca, listen to me very carefully. Whatever your father's lawyers told you, whatever accusations they're making, do not do anything until we discuss it. Do you understand? These people are trying to manipulate you." "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll see you at home." She ended the call. "He's lying," she said, "about being at the office. I can always tell when he's lying." There's this tiny change in his voice. Douglas looked up from his phone. "My investigator has eyes on John's downtown office. The lights are off. No one's been there all day." "Then where is he?" I asked. Patricia, who'd been working on her laptop, spoke up. "According to Cole Ventures Capital's corporate filings, they maintain a registered office at—" She read off an address in Richmond near the airport. "He's running," Douglas said. "We need to contact the RCMP immediately." While Douglas made calls, I sat with Rebecca. She was staring at her phone at the photo on her lock screen. John and Emma at Emma's 7th birthday party. All smiles. "How do I tell her?" Rebecca asked quietly. "How do I explain to my daughter that her father is a criminal? That he destroyed our family?" "The same way Catherine and I had to explain difficult things to you when you were young. With honesty, with love, and with the promise that we'll get through it together. I testified against you. I looked a jury in the eye and said you were guilty. How do you not hate me?" I took her hand. "Because you're my daughter. Because I know who you are underneath all the manipulation and lies. You're Catherine's daughter. You're strong, you're smart, and you're good. John exploited those qualities, but he didn't destroy them." She broke down again, and I held her while the chaos unfolded around us. Within 2 hours, the RCMP had issued a warrant for John Cole's arrest. They'd also launched an investigation into Martin Cole and Cole Ventures Capital. But John was gone. Security footage from YVR showed him checking in for a flight to Hong Kong 6 hours before the hearing even started. He'd known this was coming. Had probably planned his escape route months ago. "We'll get him," Douglas assured us. "Canada has an extradition treaty with Hong Kong. It'll take time, but we'll get him." That evening, I went home for the first time in 22 months. Rebecca came with me. We stood in the doorway of the house where she'd grown up, where Catherine and I had spent our lives together. "It hasn't changed," she said softly. "I couldn't change anything. Every time I thought about redecorating or moving, it felt like erasing Catherine, erasing our history." We walked through the rooms together. The kitchen where Catherine had taught Rebecca to bake. The living room where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays. The den where I'd helped Rebecca with homework and college applications. "I brought Emma here sometimes," Rebecca admitted. "When John was traveling, I'd tell her stories about her grandmother, about you. I never told John about those visits. Why not? Because some part of me knew. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't let myself see it." That night, Rebecca stayed in her old room. I lay in the bed I'd once shared with Catherine and thought about everything that had been lost and everything that might still be saved. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, financial investigations, and painful reconstruction. The Crown dropped all charges against me. The original verdict was formally overturned. But clearing my name legally was only the beginning. Holloway Marine Supply was in shambles. Douglas, Patricia, and a team of forensic accountants worked to untangle the web of fraudulent transactions and trace where the stolen money had gone. Most of it was gone, spent propping up Cole Ventures Capital, which was revealed to be drowning in debt. Martin Cole had been running a sophisticated scheme, borrowing against fabricated assets and using new investments to pay off old obligations. When everything collapsed, Martin Cole faced criminal charges of his own. He cut a deal with prosecutors, agreeing to testify against John in exchange for a reduced sentence. John remained in Hong Kong fighting extradition. His father's testimony painted him as the mastermind of the entire operation. The plan to frame me, to seduce and manipulate Rebecca, to steal Holloway Marine Supply, had all been John's design. Gerald Thompson cooperated fully with investigators. His testimony and the records he provided helped build an airtight case. In exchange for his cooperation, he received probation and community service rather than prison time. But the damage to the company was severe. We'd lost our largest clients. Our reputation in the industry had been destroyed. We had 65 demoralized employees and mounting debt. "We should declare bankruptcy," Rebecca said during one particularly brutal financial review meeting. "Start over with something new." "This company has Catherine's name on it," I replied. "Her legacy. We're not giving up." I moved back into my old office. It felt strange at first, sitting at the desk where I'd been confronted with fabricated evidence 2 years earlier. But slowly it started to feel like mine again. Rebecca and I worked 16-hour days. We reached out to old clients explaining what had happened. Some were willing to listen, many were not. The Coast Guard contract was gone permanently, but we secured a smaller contract with BC Ferries. Then another with a commercial fishing operation in Prince Rupert. Small victories, but they added up. We restructured the company's debt, sold off non-essential assets, let go of more employees, keeping only the core team who'd stuck with us through everything. And slowly, impossibly, we began to rebuild. Emma came to visit every weekend. She was 9 now, dealing with her own confusion about why her father had disappeared. Rebecca and I tried to answer her questions honestly without overwhelming her. "Grandpa," she asked one Saturday afternoon while we were having lunch, "is Daddy a bad person?" I looked at Rebecca, who nodded for me to answer. "Your daddy made some very bad choices," I said carefully. "He hurt people, including people he was supposed to love and protect, but that doesn't mean he was all bad. People are complicated. Emma, we can love someone and still acknowledge they did terrible things." "Do you still love him?" she asked Rebecca. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I love the person I thought he was, but that person might not have been real." 6 months after my release, we had our first profitable quarter. Small profits, barely enough to matter. But it was progress. The industry started to take notice. Articles began appearing in maritime trade publications. The story of Richard Holloway, wrongly imprisoned and now fighting to save his company. It generated sympathy, but more importantly, it generated business. 1 year after my release, we got an unexpected call. The Canadian Coast Guard wanted to meet. Rebecca and I sat across from Commander Patricia Wilson and her procurement team in their office in Victoria. "Mr. Holloway, Ms. Cole," Commander Wilson began. "We've been following your company's recovery with interest. The previous contract was terminated due to ethical concerns about leadership. Those concerns no longer exist." "Are you saying," Rebecca started, "we'd like to discuss reinstating the contract, pending successful completion of a new vetting process and some adjustments to terms?" It was smaller than the original contract. More restrictive terms, but it was the Coast Guard. We signed the agreement 3 months later. By then, we'd hired back 40 employees. Revenue was approaching 60% of our pre-crisis levels. We weren't fully recovered, but we were surviving. And survival, I'd learned, was its own kind of victory. John Cole was extradited from Hong Kong after 18 months of legal battles. He arrived back in Vancouver in chains, looking thinner and older than I remembered. His trial was scheduled for the fall. Rebecca didn't attend. "I can't," she told me. "I can't sit in that courtroom and look at him, not yet." "I understand. Will you go?" "Yes, I need to see it through." The trial lasted 6 weeks. The Crown's case was overwhelming. Martin Cole's testimony, Gerald Thompson's testimony, Patricia's forensic analysis, the malware evidence, the corporate fraud, the systematic theft of Holloway Marine Supply's assets. John's defense attorney tried to argue that Martin had been the mastermind, that John was just following his father's instructions. But the evidence contradicted that. John had initiated contact with the board members. John had installed the malware. John had orchestrated the entire scheme. On the witness stand, John was calm, almost bored. "Did you create fraudulent evidence to frame your father-in-law for embezzlement?" the prosecutor asked. "I did what was necessary to secure my family's financial future," John replied. "By destroying an innocent man's life?" Richard Holloway was an obstacle to progress. The maritime industry is changing. His company needed younger, more innovative leadership. "So you framed him for a crime he didn't commit." "I created an opportunity for necessary change." The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdicts came rapid fire. Fraud, guilty. Embezzlement, guilty. Computer crimes, guilty. Conspiracy, guilty. The sentencing hearing was brief. The judge looked at John with undisguised contempt. "Mr. Cole, you executed a sophisticated multi-year scheme that destroyed lives, ruined a family, and nearly destroyed a 40-year-old business. You showed no remorse throughout this trial. The court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison." 12 years. 3 times what I'd been facing for crimes I didn't commit. As they led John away, he looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since this whole nightmare began. I saw no remorse, no apology. Just cold calculation, wondering where his plan had failed. Outside the courthouse, I spoke to the reporters who'd been covering the trial. "Justice has been served today, but this was never about revenge. It was about truth. About clearing my name and reclaiming my family's legacy. I hope this case serves as a warning about the devastating effects of greed and manipulation." That evening, Rebecca, Emma, and I had dinner at our house. The same house where we'd celebrated holidays and birthdays years ago, before everything fell apart. "Grandpa," Emma said, "does this mean things are back to normal now?" I looked at Rebecca. She gave me a sad smile. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "Things are never going back to exactly how they were. Too much has changed. But that doesn't mean things can't be good again. Just different good." "Better good?" she asked. "Maybe, eventually." After Emma went to bed, Rebecca and I sat on the back porch with glasses of wine. "I've been thinking about stepping down as CFO," she said quietly. "Why?" "Because every time I look at the financial statements, I see all the decisions I made that nearly destroyed the company. Even though I didn't know, I still signed off on everything. You were manipulated by someone you loved. That's not the same as being complicit. Isn't it, though? I had access to all the information. I could have dug deeper, asked harder questions, but I didn't, because I trusted John more than I trusted my own instincts. We all trust the people we love. That's not a weakness, Rebecca. That's being human." She was quiet for a long moment. "Do you think Mom would forgive me for what I did to you? Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. She would understand that you were a victim too. And she would be incredibly proud of how hard you fought to make things right. I testified against you. I looked a jury in the eye and said you were guilty. I know. And it almost destroyed me. But Rebecca, holding on to that anger, that hurt, it would destroy what we're trying to rebuild. Not just the company, us." She started crying, and I held her just like I had in the courtroom when this all started to unravel. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I know. I forgive you." 2 years after my release from prison, Holloway Marine Supply held its 42nd anniversary celebration. We'd invited all our employees, past and present, the ones who'd stayed during the crisis and the ones we'd been able to hire back, our clients, our vendors, our supporters. The event was held at the Maritime Museum in Vancouver, a venue Catherine and I had always loved. Rebecca gave a speech about resilience, about learning from mistakes, about the importance of transparency and accountability. I spoke about Catherine's legacy, about the values that had guided the company for 4 decades, about second chances, but the real moment came when Emma, now 11, stood up and read a short essay she'd written for school. "My family has been through a lot of hard things," she read. "My dad did bad things and hurt people. My mom made mistakes because she trusted the wrong person. My grandpa went to prison even though he didn't do anything wrong." She paused, looking at her notes. "My teacher asked us to write about courage. Most kids wrote about superheroes or soldiers, but I think courage is what my grandpa and mom did after everything fell apart. They could have given up. They could have stayed mad at each other, but instead they forgave and worked together and saved our family's business." She looked up directly at me. "My grandpa says we can't change the past, but we can build a better future. I think that's what courage really means." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the speeches, people mingled and shared stories. Former employees talked about how Holloway Marine Supply had given them their start in the industry. Clients discussed the quality of our service. Vendors praised our integrity. Gerald Thompson was there. He approached me hesitantly. "Richard, I don't expect you to ever fully forgive me, but I wanted you to know that testifying against John, helping expose the truth, it gave me a chance to at least partially redeem myself." "You did the right thing when it mattered," I replied. "That counts for something." Patricia Lung, the forensic accountant who'd been instrumental in proving my innocence, pulled me aside. "I've been offered a position with the RCMP's Financial Crimes Division. They want someone with private sector experience to help investigate corporate fraud cases. You should take it. You'd be excellent at it. I wanted to ask your permission first. I know working this case took a toll on you. If my new position would be a difficult reminder. Patricia, you helped save my life. Whatever you choose to do next, you have my full support and gratitude." Douglas arrived late, apologizing for a scheduling conflict with another case. "How does it feel?" he asked, looking around the room at the celebration. "Strange," I admitted. 3 years ago, I was in prison, convinced I'd lost everything. Now we're celebrating. It doesn't feel quite real. You earned this, Richard. You never gave up. You never lost faith in yourself or your daughter. That took strength most people don't have." Later that evening, after most guests had left, Rebecca and I stood in front of a new plaque that had been mounted in the museum lobby. "In honor of Catherine Holloway, whose vision and integrity guided Holloway Marine Supply for 35 years. Her legacy continues in the company she built and the family she loved." "She would have loved this," Rebecca said softly. "She would have been furious at what happened to us and incredibly proud of how we fought back." "Do you think about her often?" "Every day, especially during the worst moments in prison. I'd imagine what she would say, how she'd counsel me to stay strong, to believe in eventual justice. I miss her so much." "Me too." We stood there in silence, remembering the woman who'd made all of this possible. 3 years after my release, I received an unexpected letter from Fraser Valley Institution, the prison where I'd served 22 months. One of my former cellmates, Raymond, the tax fraud guy, had died of a heart attack. In his will, he'd left me a letter. The letter was brief, written in Raymond's careful handwriting. "Richard, if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. I wanted you to know that sharing a cell with you changed my perspective on a lot of things. You never became bitter. Never let the injustice turn you into the kind of person who deserved to be in here. You taught that financial literacy class because you genuinely wanted to help people. You listened to the other inmates' stories without judgment. Most people here are guilty. I was guilty, but you weren't. and somehow that made you the strongest person I ever met. There's something I never told you. During your last month there, a younger inmate approached me, said someone outside had offered him money to hurt you, make it look like an accident. I convinced him not to. Told him you were one of the good ones, that hurting you would bring heat none of us needed. I thought you should know that someone tried and failed to silence you even after you'd already been locked away. Take care, Richard. I hope you got your life back. Raymond. I sat in my office staring at the letter. Someone had tried to have me hurt in prison. And there was only one person with motivation to do that. John. I called Douglas immediately. Can we use this as evidence of additional crimes? Douglas read the letter carefully. It's hearsay without Raymond's testimony, and he's dead. But I can file it with the Crown. If they can find the inmate who was approached, who can testify about who made the offer, it could add to John's sentence. 2 months later, the RCMP located the inmate Raymond had mentioned. He'd been released the previous year and was willing to cooperate in exchange for immunity. His testimony was damning. John had arranged the hit through an intermediary, offering $10,000 to have me seriously injured or killed while in prison. The plan had failed because Raymond, a convicted criminal, had more integrity than John Cole ever did. John was charged with attempted murder. The trial added another 8 years to his sentence, 20 years total. He'd be 65 when he got out. I felt no satisfaction at the news, just bone-deep weariness. It's over, Rebecca said when I told her. Finally, completely over. Is it, though? John will eventually get out. Martin Cole will get out. The people they manipulated and used, they're still out there. But we're still here too, still fighting, still building. That has to count for something. She was right, of course. 5 years after walking out of prison, I stood in the main warehouse of Holloway Marine Supply, watching our team load equipment for our largest contract to date. We'd secured an exclusive partnership with the Canadian Navy to supply specialized navigation equipment for their fleet modernization program. 3 years, $15 million on with options to extend. Our revenue had exceeded pre-crisis levels. We'd hired 180 employees, opened a second location in Halifax. Rebecca had proven herself to be an exceptional CFO, implementing financial controls and transparency measures that made fraud nearly impossible. Emma was 14 now, brilliant, thoughtful, already talking about studying business at UBC like her mother. She spent summers working at the company, learning the business from the ground up just as Rebecca had. She never asked about John anymore. He'd become a distant memory, a cautionary tale about how greed could destroy everything. I was 68 years old. My hair had gone completely white during those 22 months in prison and never changed back. I'd retired from the CEO position 2 years ago, passing the role to Rebecca while I remained as chairman of the board. The company was in better hands than it had ever been. That evening, I sat in Catherine's memorial garden behind our house. We'd created it the year after she died, a small sanctuary of her favorite flowers and a bench where I could sit and remember. Rebecca found me there, as she often did. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, sitting beside me. "Just reflecting on how much has changed. 5 years ago, I was in prison and convinced everything was lost. Now look at us. Do you ever regret it, fighting so hard to rebuild? Never. This company is Catherine's legacy, our legacy. It represents 40 years of integrity and hard work. Letting John destroy that would have been the real crime." "I got a letter today," Rebecca said quietly. "From John." I was tense. What did it say? He wanted me to know he's being considered for early parole. Asked if I'd be willing to write a letter of support. What are you going to do? Nothing. I won't write a letter supporting him, but I won't oppose his parole either. He's Emma's father. Someday she might want a relationship with him. I won't make that impossible. You're more forgiving than I am. I learned from the best, she smiled sadly. You forgave me when you had every reason not to. That taught me that forgiveness isn't about the person who wronged you. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the evening birds. Dad, Rebecca said eventually, there's something I've been wanting to tell you, something I should have said years ago. What's that? Thank you for never giving up on me, for believing I was a victim rather than a villain, for rebuilding our relationship when I didn't deserve it. You're my daughter. There was never a question. Most fathers would have walked away. I would have said I'd made my choices and had to live with them. Your mother wouldn't have let me. I smiled. She would have told me that family fights for each other no matter what, that blood and love matter more than mistakes. I miss her wisdom. Me too. A month later, I received a call from the parole board. John had been denied early release. The attempted murder charge, combined with his complete lack of remorse, meant he'd serve his full sentence. I felt nothing when hearing the news, not satisfaction, not vindication. Just a distant acknowledgement that justice, however delayed, had been served. That weekend was Emma's 14th birthday. We had a party at the house, the backyard filled with her friends and family. Watching her laugh with her friends, confident and happy, I thought about how close we'd come to losing everything, how John's plan had nearly worked. But it hadn't. We'd survived, we'd recovered, we'd rebuilt. And that was the real victory. Not John's imprisonment or Martin's conviction or Gerald's disgrace, but our ability to stand together, to forgive, to create something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Later that evening, after the guests had left and Emma had gone to bed, Rebecca and I sat on the porch. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" she asked. "I think she'd be frustrated. It took us so long to figure things out. But yes, I think she'd be proud. I talk to her sometimes in my head. Tell her about the company, about Emma, about you." "What does she say back?" Rebecca smiled. "She reminds me that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about always getting back up." That sounds like Catherine. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere across the city in a federal prison, John Cole was serving his sentence for crimes that had nearly destroyed us. But here in the home Catherine and I had built, in the company we'd created, in the family we'd fought to preserve, life continued, imperfect, complicated, but undeniably ours. And that was enough. 10 years after my release from prison, Holloway Marine Supply celebrated its 52nd anniversary. I was 73 years old, officially retired from all operational roles, though I still attended board meetings and offered advice when asked. Rebecca was now CEO. Emma, 19 and studying business at UBC, worked part-time at the company, showing the same natural aptitude for the industry that her mother and grandmother had possessed. The company had grown beyond anything Catherine and I could have imagined. 4 locations across Canada, 300 employees, contracts with government and private sector clients throughout North America, and more importantly, a reputation for integrity that had been tested in the worst possible way and emerged stronger. The anniversary celebration was held at the Vancouver Convention Centre. Over 500 people attended. Employees, clients, vendors, industry partners. During the speeches, I was asked to say a few words. I stood at the podium looking out at the faces in the crowd. Some I'd known for decades. Others had joined since the crisis. 52 years ago, I began. My late wife, Catherine, and I started Holloway Marine Supply in a small warehouse in East Vancouver. We had big dreams but limited resources. What we did have was integrity, a commitment to treating people fairly, to delivering quality, to building something that would last. 10 years ago, that integrity was tested in ways we never could have imagined. I was wrongly imprisoned. Our company was nearly destroyed. Our family was torn apart. But we survived. Not because we were lucky, but because we refused to compromise our values even when it would have been easier to give up. This company represents more than just maritime supply services. It represents the idea that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs you everything, that still matters. My daughter Rebecca taught me that. She made mistakes, trusted the wrong person, but when she learned the truth, she had the courage to make it right. She has become the leader this company needs. My granddaughter Emma is learning that. Watching her grow up with the values her grandmother would have been proud of gives me hope for the future. And my wife Catherine, who isn't here but whose presence is felt in every decision we make, she taught us that a business is only as strong as the principles it's built on. To everyone who stood by us during our darkest time, to everyone who gave us second chances, to everyone who believed that Holloway Marine Supply was more than the scandal that nearly destroyed us, thank you. And to anyone facing their own crisis, their own moment of doubt, remember this: integrity is not about never falling. It's about how you stand back up. The applause was sustained and genuine. After the speeches, I found myself standing alone for a moment, looking at a memorial display the team had created. It featured photos from throughout the company's history. Catherine and I at the original warehouse. Rebecca's first day as an employee. Emma as a child visiting the office. And newer photos. The team is celebrating major contracts. The grand opening of new locations. Awards for business ethics and community service. A complete story, the good and the bad, the triumphs and the near destruction. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice beside me said. I turned to find Patricia Lung, now a senior investigator with the RCMP's Financial Crimes Division. Patricia, I didn't know you were here. Wouldn't miss it. Your case changed the trajectory of my career. Made me realize I wanted to fight financial fraud professionally, not just investigate it. How is that going? We've taken down 3 major schemes in the past 2 years. Each one I think about the lessons from your case, about how sophisticated these frauds can be, how they target trust and family relationships. Any as complex as what John pulled off? A few. But none where the victims fought back as effectively as you and Rebecca did. We stood together looking at the photos. Do you know what happened to John? Patricia asked. He was released 6 months ago, served 15 years of his 20-year sentence with good behavior. Have you heard from him? No. Rebecca did, though. He sent a letter asking to meet Emma. Rebecca declined. How is Emma handling that? She's curious about him. Natural, I suppose, but she understands why her mother is protective. Maybe someday when she's older, she'll make her own choice about whether to reach out. Patricia nodded. And the company? Truly recovered? Better than recovered. We're stronger now because we had to rebuild with intentional transparency and ethical safeguards. The crisis forced us to examine every aspect of our operations, to implement controls we probably should have had years ago. Silver linings. Painful ones, but yes. As the evening wound down, I found Rebecca standing on the convention center's waterfront balcony, looking out at the harbor lights. Quite a night, I said, joining her. Mom would have loved this. She would have made a speech 3 times better than mine. Rebecca laughed. Probably. But she would have been proud of you, of us, of what we built back. No regrets? About fighting for the company? Never. About the time lost with you every day, but we can't change the past. We can only build better futures. Exactly. Emma appeared, looking for her mother. Grandpa, Mom, they want us for the final toast. We walked back inside together, 3 generations of Holloway. different from what Catherine and I had imagined all those years ago, shaped by crisis and betrayal and the hard work of forgiveness. But still standing, still building, still together. The MC called for the final toast. Glasses were raised throughout the room. To Holloway Marine Supply, the MC said, to 52 years of integrity, innovation, and resilience. To the next 52 years ahead. To the next 52 years, the crowd echoed. I raised my glass, looking at Rebecca and Emma beside me, to Catherine's memory. Justice finally served, to a family that survived the worst and chose to forgive, to the company we almost lost and fought to reclaim, to second chances and new beginnings, to all of it. And as the crowd drank to the future, I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Peace. Complete, hard-won, deeply earned peace. The nightmare was truly over, and the life we'd rebuilt was just beginning. This story is about more than corporate fraud or false imprisonment. It's about the devastating impact of betrayal by those we trust most deeply. It's about the strength required to forgive when every instinct screams for revenge. Richard lost 22 months of his life, his reputation, and temporarily his relationship with his daughter. But he refused to let bitterness destroy what remained. He fought not just to clear his name, but to rebuild his family. Rebecca made terrible mistakes, but she was also a victim of manipulation by someone she loved. Her journey back to her father, her willingness to face her own complicity and work to make amends, that took a different kind of courage. The real victory wasn't John's imprisonment. It was Richard and Rebecca choosing forgiveness over anger, choosing to rebuild rather than walk away, choosing family over pride. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms or boardrooms. They're fought in our own hearts, where we must decide whether past wrongs will define our future. Richard chose differently. Rebecca chose differently. And that made all the difference.